It began on a Tuesday when the first cases were reported, and by Thursday no one could pretend it was just a rumor anymore. People in my city were breaking down in the streets, clutching their heads, sobbing for reasons that weren't theirs. A man in a cafe collapsed, not because of his own pain, but because he felt the grief of a stranger sitting 3 tables away. They called it the empathy virus, though no one knew if it was a virus in the medical sense or something else entirely. By the time the government made a statement, it was too late. The outbreak moved like wildfire, spreading not just through touch, but through proximity, through the invisible air between us. I watched my neighbor, a sharp, stoic woman who never smiled at anyone, stand in her doorway and cry uncontrollably while looking at a young couple arguing across the street. She didn't even know them. The scariest part wasn't the tears. It was how her own voice was gone when I called her name, replaced by the tone of the woman in the fight, like she was borrowing a soul that didn't belong to her. I should probably explain why I'm even telling you this. I'm one of the few who doesn't feel it. Not a bit. When it first happened, I thought maybe I was just lucky, immune. But then the news called us non-responders, and every part of me knew that luck had nothing to do with it. Luck doesn't get your front door knocked down at 2 a.m. by people in gray uniforms, faces covered, holding scanners. Luck doesn't put you in a chair under fluorescent lights while someone in a white coat says, "You have something we need." That first week was chaos. People with the virus, if that's what it was, became emotional mirrors. If someone near them was afraid, they were afraid. If someone was angry, they were angry. If one person laughed, the whole room laughed. At first it sounded almost beautiful, like we could finally understand each other without words. But it wasn't understanding, it was drowning. You couldn't tell where you ended and someone else began. My best friend, Claire, got infected on day 3. I didn't notice right away. She came over to my apartment, threw herself on the couch, and just started laughing. Not her normal laugh. It was deep, almost manic, and it didn't stop. I asked her what was so funny, and she shook her head, saying she couldn't help it. Someone in the building was watching a comedy show, and she could feel every bit of their amusement. An hour later, she was crying so hard she could barely breathe, because apparently the same person was now watching a war documentary. I tried to keep her in my apartment, to shield her somehow, but she said she couldn't stand the silence I carried around me. "It's wrong, Alex," she told me. "You're empty. Like a wall. I can't feel you at all." That's when I realized my immunity wasn't just rare, it was dangerous. People infected by the virus crave connection, and when they got close to me, they felt nothing. That nothing scared them. A few days later, I got the visit from the uniforms. They didn't hurt me. They didn't even raise their voices. They just scanned me, confirmed something on a handheld device, and told me I'd be relocated for observation. I refused. That night, I barely slept, every creak of the building making me think they'd come back. And they did. Only this time, they weren't alone. With them was a man in a sleek black coat, no mask, no scanner. He studied me like I was a puzzle he'd been waiting years to solve. "You don't feel what they feel," he said finally. "But you can see it, can't you?" I didn't answer. His eyes narrowed. "You're not just immune. You're resistant in ways we don't understand. Which means you might be the key to stopping it, or the reason it started." That was the first time I thought about the possibility that maybe I wasn't just a bystander in all of this. Maybe my immunity wasn't natural. The man didn't try to take me that night. He simply left a card on my table with a phone number and 2 words, "When ready." The next morning, the world outside had shifted again. Entire neighborhoods were quarantined, but not to keep the virus in, to keep the immune out. The infected didn't want to lose what they were feeling. They called it the connection, now, as if it were some kind of spiritual awakening. On the news, a smiling woman with tear-streaked cheeks said, "We're finally living as one. We won't let them take that away." Them, I realized, meant people like me. I kept thinking about Claire. I hadn't seen her since that day on my couch. Part of me wanted to find her, to make sure she was safe. The other part knew that if I walked into one of those zones, I might not walk out. And yet, by the end of that week, I was standing at the edge of one. The barricade was just 2 abandoned buses, their windows smashed, the word Unity spray-painted across in sloppy red letters. Beyond it, people moved slowly, dreamlike, touching each other constantly, hands on shoulders, fingers brushing, arms linked. I took 1 step forward, and a man at the barricade looked right at me. His smile faded instantly. "You're wrong," he whispered, as if I'd done something unforgivable just by existing. Then he shouted, and others turned to stare. In their eyes was no hatred, only something worse, pity. That was the moment I understood. In a city where everyone felt everything, the one person who felt nothing might be the most dangerous person alive. The man's shout at the barricade brought them fast. 3, maybe 4 people broke from the crowd, moving with a strange mix of urgency and calm. Their eyes locked on me like they could see my silence from a mile away. I turned to leave, but one of them called out, "Don't run. We just want to talk." Their tone was soft, but I'd already learned that softness meant nothing here. It could turn to a scream in seconds if the wrong emotion rippled through the group. I took 2 steps back, my hands raised slightly, pretending I might comply. Then I bolted. The sound that followed wasn't a chase, it was a wave. Not footsteps but voices, dozens of them, merging into a single plea, "Don't go." It was disorienting, too unified, like their thoughts had been blended into one current. I sprinted down an alley, vaulted over a pile of trash bags, and ducked into an empty laundromat. My chest was burning, not from the run but from the feeling of being hunted by people who believed they were saving me. I hid there until the voices faded, then made my way back to my apartment by looping through side streets, doubling back twice. I knew I couldn't stay. Someone had seen me. They would remember. And if they didn't come for me, the uniforms would. That night, I pulled the black coat man's card from my drawer. The number was just 9 digits, no area code, no name. I dialed. 1 ring. Then, "You waited longer than I expected," his voice said. "I didn't agree to anything," I told him. "But you called," he replied. "Which means you've realized what they'll do to you if you don't come with me." He gave me an address. No explanation, then hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time before packing a bag. The address took me to a building with no lights, just a steel door and a keypad. I knocked. A slot slid open, revealing a pair of sharp eyes. They scanned me without a word, then unlocked the door. Inside was a room full of people, not infected, not like me either. They were somewhere in between. They still felt, but not constantly. They could filter it, choose. One of them, a woman with close-cropped hair, said they were called stabilizers. "We were like the infected at first," she explained, "but we learned to block it, to some degree. You don't have to block anything. You're a complete void." The man in the black coat appeared from a side door. "Our research suggests the outbreak isn't biological," he said. "It's engineered by design." And the design was incomplete. He told me about a facility outside the city, known only as the archive. Supposedly, it was a data vault, memories, emotions stored and cataloged. A decade ago, there had been an experiment to create shared emotional networks, a kind of empathy augmentation. The goal was peaceful, reduce violence, build understanding. But somewhere in the chain of command, the purpose shifted. They released a test wave, he said, and it didn't fade. It spread. You can't switch off a human network once it's activated. You can only disrupt it. And you are a disruption. I didn't want to believe him, but too much lined up. My immunity, the way infected people reacted to me, the strange feeling that I was out of sync with the rest of the world. Still, one question burned. If you know where this came from, why not just shut it down? His jaw tightened. Because the archive is protected, and because not everyone wants it gone. There are people, entire communities, who will fight to keep it. You've seen them. I thought of the barricade, the hands constantly touching, the eyes full of pity. They didn't see it as a sickness. They saw it as evolution. He slid a small device across the table to me, no bigger than a pack of gum. "This is a disruptor," he said. "It can create a localized dead zone. No emotional bleed, no shared feeling. Think of it as making others like you, but only for a few minutes. We need to test it in the field. You'll go into one of the zones and activate it. Watch what happens. Report back. And if they react badly?" I asked. "Run," he said simply. "And if you can't run, then pray your immunity works both ways." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the tiny, ugly part of me that wanted to prove their connection was nothing but a chain. The next day, I walked back toward the barricade, this time from a different angle. I slipped into the crowd unnoticed, keeping my head down. The disruptor was in my pocket, my thumb on the button. At first, it was exactly as before, hands brushing, eyes meeting with that unsettling depth. Then I pressed it. The change was immediate. People froze mid-step. Conversations faltered. The smiles faded, not into anger or fear, but into a kind of hollow confusion, like waking from a vivid dream you can't quite remember. One man clutched his chest and stumbled back. A woman looked at her friend as if seeing her for the first time and not liking what she saw. Then, just as fast, the crowd turned toward me. Not all at once, but in clusters, like pockets of sudden realization spreading outward. The air felt heavy, charged, but empty of their emotions. Just empty. Someone shouted, "It's him. He's killing it." And the wave began again, but this time it wasn't a plea, it was fury. I ran. The disruptor was still active in my pocket, creating a moving bubble of silence in a sea of chaos. I didn't stop until I was blocks away, ducking into an underground station. My phone buzzed. It was the man in the black coat. "Well," he asked. "It worked," I said. "Too well." There was a pause. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "Good. Now we can scale it up." 2 nights later, I was back in the steel-doored building, the disruptor on the table between us. The man in the black coat had 3 others with him, none of them familiar. One carried a black case, the kind you'd expect to see holding a weapon. "You prove the device works," he said. "Now we take it to the archive." My stomach tightened. "You make it sound like we're going in and out like it's nothing." He shook his head. "It's not nothing. But we won't get another chance. A shipment is leaving the archive tomorrow night. Equipment, maybe data. The transport will be vulnerable." He slid a crude map toward me. The route cut through industrial zones and an unfinished highway bypass. "We intercept them here," he said, pointing to a stretch marked with an X. "You'll activate a large-scale disruptor. Bigger radius, more power. If it works, their coordination collapses. Then we take the truck." I kept my hands on my knees, hiding the fact they were shaking. "And if it doesn't?" He didn't answer. The next night, we were crouched behind a row of shipping containers under a flickering streetlight. The black case was open, revealing a device the size of a car battery, cables coiled around it. My job was to carry it close enough to the transport, hit the trigger, and get out. Easy, in theory. The truck came into view at exactly midnight, flanked by 2 unmarked SUVs. Even from here I could feel it, that strange unity in the way they moved, the synchronized turn of their heads. They weren't talking, but something was flowing between them. I slipped out from cover, the device heavy in my arms, and moved along the shadow of the fence. 20 meters. 15. 10. Then a voice whispered behind me, "Don't do it." I spun, almost dropping the device. A woman stood there, alone, no weapon. Her hair was damp, like she'd been running in the rain. Her eyes locked on mine. "If you shut it down here, they'll kill everyone inside the archive," she said. My first thought was that she was with them, sent to stop me. But her tone was different, urgent, desperate, not the calm insistence of the infected. "You're lying," I said. She shook her head. "The archive isn't just a storage site. It's holding people. Hundreds. Connected, yes, but trapped. If you break the link suddenly, it could kill them. They've been in that state for years. They wouldn't survive the shock." I glanced back at the convoy. It was getting closer. My earpiece crackled. The man in the black coat's voice was sharp. "Do it now." I stepped back from the woman, trying to think, but my mind was already split in 2. If she was telling the truth, I'd be murdering people. If she was lying, hesitating meant losing the only chance to take the truck. She moved closer. "I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking you to get inside the archive first. See what's there. Then decide." The sound of engines grew louder. The SUVs were almost parallel to my position. My finger hovered over the trigger. "You don't know me?" I said. "No," she replied. "But I know what it feels like to be immune. And I know you've never forgiven yourself for what happened before all this." The words hit like a punch. I hadn't told anyone here about my past. About the night I'd stood by and watched something I could have stopped, telling myself it wasn't my business. She couldn't know, unless she'd seen it. Unless she'd been there. My earpiece crackled again, this time louder. Now. Now. The SUVs rolled past, the truck in their center. The window was closing. I looked at the disruptor, then at the woman. Her eyes didn't waver. Somewhere far away, I heard the man in the black coat curse. Then I made my choice. I dropped the disruptor to the ground and ran after the woman instead. She didn't slow down until we were blocks away, ducking into an abandoned parking garage. My chest was tight, Not from the run, but from the weight of what I'd just done. You just burned your only bridge, I said. She shook her head. You've still got me. And I can get you into the archive without killing anyone. I leaned against the cold concrete wall, trying to catch my breath. Who are you? I asked. She hesitated, then said, My name's Leora. I was one of the first test subjects. I got out before the network locked down completely. But I left people behind. Friends. Family. If we don't go soon, they won't have anything left to save. I stared at her, searching for any sign she was playing me. But there was something in her voice I hadn't heard in weeks. Uncertainty. The infected always sounded so sure, so absolute. Leora didn't. And that made me trust her, just enough to keep listening. She pulled a folded blueprint from her jacket. It was old, creased, stained. The outline of the archive was clear, multiple subterranean levels, a central chamber, something marked core interface. This is where they keep the network seed, she said. Destroy it, and the link collapses. But do it carefully, and we can bring people out one at a time. We can save them. My mind was still reeling from the fact that there was a careful way at all. The man in the black coat had made it sound binary. Keep the network or kill it. Why didn't you tell him this? I asked. She gave a bitter laugh. Because he doesn't care about saving anyone. He just wants it gone. And once it's gone, what happens to the people inside won't matter to him. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Leora rolled up the blueprint and shoved it into my hand. We have 3 days, she said. After that, the core interface will be moved, and we'll never find it again. I looked down at the rolled paper, feeling the last thread to my old ally snap. If I followed her, I was on my own. If I went back to the black coat, I'd have to explain why I'd let the truck go. Either way, the countdown had started. And in the back of my mind, one thought was already taking root. If she was lying, I might be walking straight into the archive's hands. 3 days sounded like a long time until I realized we'd have to cross half the city, avoid patrols, and break into the most heavily guarded building still functioning in what was left of the world. Leora led fast, speaking little, moving like someone who knew every alley and shadow. Twice we ducked into abandoned storefronts to avoid groups that moved with that same uncanny synchrony. Watching them from the dark, I could almost hear the silent communication flowing between them, like the hum of a hive just beyond the range of hearing. On the second night, we found shelter in a half-collapsed office building. While she studied the blueprint under a dim camping lantern, I sat across from her, the disruptor battery between us. I still hadn't decided if I trusted her. What happens if we destroy the core interface? I asked. She didn't look up. If we do it right, the link unravels slowly. People wake up one by one. There will be confusion, but they'll live. I hesitated. And if we do it wrong? Her eyes finally met mine. Then they all die. No sugarcoating. No hesitation. I appreciated that. The morning of the third day, we reached the outer perimeter. The archive loomed ahead, a massive concrete structure with no visible windows, its upper levels shaped like a fortress. The only signs of life were the sentries at the gates, their movements mirror-smooth, their heads turning in unison every few seconds. Leora pointed to a drainage culvert half hidden by overgrown weeds. Leads to sublevel 2. But we'll have to swim part of the way, and there's a grate we'll need to cut through. My throat tightened at the thought of being trapped in a narrow, dark tunnel with no room to turn back. But I nodded. The water inside was black and cold, and every sound seemed to echo. Halfway through, my boot caught on something. I froze, heart pounding, but it was just a piece of rebar jutting from the wall. When we finally emerged into a dim concrete corridor, my teeth were chattering hard enough to hurt. We followed the map down 2 more levels, passing rooms lined with dormant machinery and sealed metal doors. That's when we heard it. Footsteps, but not synchronized. A single person. We ducked into a side alcove. A man in a gray jumpsuit passed, head down, muttering to himself. He wasn't linked. Leora moved before I could stop her, grabbing his arm. Where's the core interface? She demanded. He flinched, but didn't resist. Level 6, he whispered. Through the glass hall. But you won't make it. They're moving it now. My stomach sank. The countdown had just gotten shorter. We let him go, and he bolted down the corridor. Could be a trap, I said. Leora shook her head. He's one of us. Or was. We moved faster now, the air growing warmer as we descended. By level 5, The hum was no longer imagined. It was real, a deep vibration under my feet, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Leora stopped at a heavy door and pulled a thin cable from her pack, sliding it into the control panel. 60 seconds, she murmured. My eyes swept the hall, and that's when I saw them. Two figures at the far end, moving toward us, too smoothly, too much in sync. We've got company, I said. The panel clicked open, and we slipped inside, sealing it behind us. The glass hall was ahead, a long passage lined with transparent walls. Behind the glass, rows of people sat in chairs, eyes closed, heads tilted slightly forward. Tubes ran from their temples into the ceiling. Some were young, some old, all perfectly still. My breath caught. Leora's hand gripped my arm. This is what I meant. You kill the network now, and every one of them dies like this. I stared at them, their faces peaceful but empty. I didn't know whether to think of them as prisoners or corpses. We crossed the hall quickly, but halfway through I froze. One of the people in the chairs, an older man with a scar across his cheek, opened his eyes and looked directly at me. His lips moved, soundless, but I understood the word. Run. A shadow moved behind the glass. Then alarm screamed. Leora grabbed my wrist. Go. We ran, the sound of synchronized footsteps echoing behind us. At the end of the hall, another heavy door blocked our path. Leora slammed the blueprint into my chest. If we get separated, keep moving down. Level 6, northwest quadrant. What do you mean if? I shouted. She didn't answer. Instead, she shoved me through as the door opened just enough for me to slip inside, then turned back. I caught a glimpse of figures closing in before the door slammed shut. The alarms cut off, replaced by the low, steady hum of the core interface chamber ahead. I didn't look back. The corridor opened into a massive circular room. In the center, suspended in a column of light, was the interface, a twisting lattice of silver threads, pulsing with faint blue light. Cables ran from it into the walls like veins. I stepped forward, every instinct screaming that I was too close to something alive. My hand tightened around the disruptor. If I triggered it here, everything might end, one way or another. Then I heard the door behind me open, and a voice I knew too well said, "Step away from it." I turned. The man in the black coat stepped into the light, two of his people flanking him. His eyes were cold, but there was a faint curl of satisfaction in his mouth. "I told you we'd get here first," he said. I didn't move, not because I was frozen, but because moving meant choosing, and choosing meant living with it. The man in the black coat stepped closer, his boots making no sound on the metal floor. "You think you're here to save them," he said, tilting his head toward the lattice of light. "You're not. You're here to destroy the only thing holding what's left of us together." His voice had that same strange cadence I'd heard in the linked ones, but thinner, stretched, like a thread about to snap. I tightened my grip on the disruptor. "You call enslaving millions holding things together?" I said. He smiled faintly. "It's not slavery when they want it. You think they scream inside their heads? They don't. They dream. Perfect, unbroken dreams where no one is alone, no one is hungry, no one is afraid. You trade that for chaos?" He glanced at the interface, and for a moment I thought I saw longing in his eyes, as if even he wanted to be inside it. "If it's so perfect," I said, "why aren't you linked?" He chuckled without humor. "Someone has to tend the garden." His two guards flanked him, moving with that unnatural synchronicity, eyes locked on me. My mind raced. The disruptor's charge would spread fast in this chamber, but I didn't know if it would kill the linked instantly or just break their connection. The man must have read my hesitation because he took another step forward, lowering his voice. "The woman you came with, Leora, was it? She's already linked. Voluntarily. She was before you even met her. She led you here because I let her." My chest went cold. I wanted to call him a liar, but the memory of her calm under pressure, her refusal to talk about her past, her constant knowledge of where to go, it all twisted into something that made awful sense. "You're trying to make me doubt her," I said. He shrugged. "Believe what you want. But think about it. If you kill this, you kill her. If you spare it, she lives in a world without pain." The hum of the interface seemed louder, pressing into my skull. I thought of the rows of people in the glass hall, their still faces, the man who had whispered run, the way Leora had shoved me through the door without looking back. My fingers ached from gripping the disruptor so hard. "You have one chance," the man said. Walk away, and I'll let you join her. You'll never have to feel this weight again." My heartbeat thudded in my ears, drowning out everything but his words. Then another sound broke through, a voice, faint but sharp, from the comm on my belt. "Don't listen." It was Leora. I didn't even remember she'd given me the earpiece 2 nights ago, said it was just in case we got separated. "He's lying," she said. "Do it. Now." I swallowed hard, my eyes darting between the man and the interface. "If she's linked, how is she talking to me?" I asked quietly. His jaw tightened, and I saw it, the first crack in his composure. "Last chance," he said, stepping closer, his hand reaching toward the disruptor. I pulled it back, and for a heartbeat I almost lowered it. Then I remembered the man in the chair, the word on his lips, the urgency in Leora's voice. I raised the disruptor, thumb over the activation stud. The guards moved instantly, their hands going for weapons, but I'd already made my choice. I fired. The pulse of energy slammed into the interface, and the room exploded with light. The hum turned into a piercing shriek that drilled into my bones. The lattice writhed like something alive, the silver threads snapping one by one, each break sending a shock wave through the air. The guards froze mid-step, their movements stuttering before they collapsed like puppets with cut strings. The man in the coat staggered back, his mouth open in a silent shout, his eyes wide with something between fury and despair. Then the light went nova, and I was thrown to the floor, the breath ripped from my lungs. I don't know how long I lay there, ears ringing, the taste of metal in my mouth. When I finally pushed myself up, the interface was gone. In its place was an empty column, cables dangling like dead vines. The man in the coat was on his knees, his head bowed. When he looked up, his eyes were different, no longer cold, just empty. He didn't speak. He just stayed there, as if the thing that had driven him was gone with the interface. Over the comm, Leora's voice came again, weaker now. "It worked. Get out." Before, the signal cut. I staggered toward the door, my legs trembling, but when I reached it, I stopped. Through the glass hall, people were stirring, blinking in confusion, some crying, some screaming. Others slumped forward, unmoving. I didn't know which group Leora was in. I didn't know if she was alive. The man in the coat still knelt in silence, and I realized the moral cost had just begun. Smoke clung to the air as I pushed into the glass hall, the sound of shuffling feet and muffled sobs swelling around me. A human tide waking from a dream they didn't know they were in, some clutching their heads, others staring at their hands like they didn't recognize them, and between them, the bodies of those who had never come back, their stillness a quiet accusation that followed me with every step. I scanned the crowd, calling Leora's name once. Then again, my voice hoarse, and for a moment there was nothing but the noise of confusion, until I saw her, sitting on the floor with her back against a shattered containment pod, her eyes unfocused but open, a faint tremor in her hands. I knelt in front of her, and she blinked slowly, as if my face was filtering in from another life. "You did it," she whispered, her voice thin, but I heard something else under it. Fatigue, loss, maybe even doubt. I reached out to help her up, but she flinched slightly before taking my hand, and the hesitation stayed with me even as I pulled her to her feet. We moved together toward the exit, weaving through the mass of dazed survivors, and each time one of them met my eyes, I felt the question hanging there. Was I their savior, or the one who tore away the only piece they had left? Outside, the night was sharp with cold, and the city beyond the compound was quieter than it had any right to be. The skyline flickered with intermittent power, the streets empty except for scattered groups of the freed, some huddling together, others wandering aimlessly like they'd forgotten where they were supposed to go. Leora leaned heavily on me as we made our way toward the van we'd hidden 2 nights ago. Her weight a reminder she was still here, still real, yet I couldn't shake the image of her eyes in the hall, unfocused, uncertain. "How much do you remember?" I asked quietly as I started the engine. She didn't answer right away, just stared out at the road, then said, "Not all of it, but enough to know it wasn't all bad." I gripped the wheel tighter because I'd been bracing for her to say it, for the quiet accusation that maybe I'd stolen something she hadn't wanted to lose. "They showed us things," she went on. "Moments my brother alive again, my mother before she got sick, the house the way it was when I was a kid." Her voice cracked, but she kept looking forward. "It wasn't real, but it felt real enough that I didn't want to leave. I didn't know what to say, because part of me understood, and that scared me more than anything. We drove in silence for a while, the hum of the tires the only sound, until we passed a group of people standing at a corner, one of them shouting at the others, his voice raw. He ruined it. He took it from us. And though he didn't know I was there, I felt the words hit like stones. Leora glanced at me, but didn't speak, and I wondered how many would see me as the villain before the night was over. We reached the safe house just before dawn, the first light creeping over the rooftops, painting the walls with a dull gold that made the cracked plaster and broken blinds seem almost gentle. Inside, Leora collapsed onto the couch, and I sat opposite her, the weight in the room thick enough to press against my ribs. "What now?" she asked finally, and I realized I didn't have an answer, because the truth was, breaking the interface had ended something, but it hadn't fixed anything. The people out there still had to face the hunger, the cold, the grief they'd been spared for so long, and now they'd do it without the escape that had kept them alive. "We helped them," I said, though it felt hollow. "We try to put something better in its place." She studied me for a long moment, then shook her head slightly. "You still don't see it, do you? There is no better. There's only what we can stand." Her words sat between us like a truth I didn't want to look at, and when I finally met her gaze, I thought I saw a flicker of the old Link there, not the control, but the yearning for it, and I wondered if, given the choice, she'd go back. Later, when she'd fallen asleep, I stepped outside, the dawn light colder now, the streets below still scattered with the freed, their voices carrying on the wind, some angry, some relieved, and somewhere among them, the man, in the black coat, walking without his guards, his eyes empty but his steps steady, as if he still had a purpose I couldn't see. I knew I could go after him, try to finish what I started, but I didn't move, because deep down I wasn't sure I'd been right. The interface had been a prison, yes, but maybe it had also been the only thing keeping the cracks in this world from splitting wide open. The thought stayed with me as I turned back inside, the weight of my choice settling like a shadow that wouldn't lift, and I realized there would be no clear victory here. Only the quiet knowledge that I had changed everything, and not all of it for the better. In the silence of the room, with Leora's breathing steady and the city holding its uncertain breath, I found myself asking the question I knew would follow me for the rest of my life. If given the chance to undo it, to bring back their dream, would I?